Boy, it's great to see every one of you who have joined us today for week number 2 of our Love Song series. Didn't we get off to a great start last Sunday? Wow, somebody told me the grocery stores in the area sold out of raisins last week. But we had a great time, and do want to not only welcome those of you in the room, but those of you who are joining us online. Even if you could not be here physically, we're glad that you are part of this service nonetheless. And we are going to dive right into this. If you would like to take notes, and I certainly encourage you to do so, our ushers have a paper copy they can get to you of the outline. So if you'll raise your hand, they'll be happy to take care of that. Do want to mention one other thing. We had so many requests last week. We don't normally ever burn a CD of the messages anymore. That was kind of old school in the day because we put everything online, and so usually by Monday you can watch the service again, watch the message, and so that's what we've done. But we had so many requests last week from people who said, I've got some friends that I want to get this set to because they won't go online and do it, and so I talked to our tech team and they decided we'll do that, not making any promises for future, but for this series we're doing that. So if you would like the entire set of 5 messages from Love Song, the Song of Solomon, you can go to the information desk, and you have to pay for it in advance. We're only taking orders, and then on that last week you'll get all 5 of those messages. So if you're interested in that, you can help yourself. I do want to remind you of some ground rules as we're getting started today, and that is well, the ground rules are, first of all, we're only going to listen for ourselves. We're not listening for somebody else. I know some of you think, man, I wish my ex-husband could have heard that, or I wish my wife could hear that. No, we're not listening for anybody else, because while you're thinking about who else could use that message, you're missing what God has for you. So we're only listening for ourselves, and we are only listening from this point forward. This is not intended to bring about guilt and condemnation as you think about the mistakes you made in the past. The Bible tells us that there is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. And so I'm not worried about your past. I'm only trying to help you for the future going forward from today. Does that make sense? All right. And I do need to tell you that next Sunday, week number 3 of the series, is about the wedding night and the honeymoon. Actually, it takes almost 2 full chapters in the Song of Solomon to describe that, as that the bride says that she wanted her husband all night long. That did not come from Lionel Richie. That came from the Song of Solomon. All right? And so it's going to be a message about godly sex next week, and it will be unfiltered. I would say it's PG-13. So if you're a parent and you normally keep your children in the service with you, I'm not sure why anybody would do that anyway, because they will love Kids Life. But if you have children under age 13 and you normally keep them with you, please be advised, it will be plain next week. So if you don't want them hearing that and you don't want to be embarrassed by it, I encourage you to come early and drop your child off at Kids Life. You might find out how much they really do enjoy it. So today, I really can't take the time to review last week. So if you were not here, I do urge you to go online. You can watch that message in its entirety, because we're going verse by verse through the Song of Solomon, and every message will kind of build on the one before it. So don't have time to do a lot of review with that, but I do encourage you to get it that way. And today we're moving on. Last week they were just kind of getting to know each other, starting their dating relationship, I guess. Today we're talking about the season of courtship, when things start to get serious and you're looking towards marriage. We're really talking about pursuing that person that God has placed in your life, not only before marriage, but also during marriage as well. We'll start with Song of Solomon chapter 1, the first 3 verses. We're going to use these every single week in this series because I think this is our theme. It begins with Solomon's Song of Songs. Last week we saw, the Bible tells us he wrote 1,005 songs, but this one was his best, and he knew it. So it's the Song of Songs, and then the woman speaks and says, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love, the way you treat people, the way you love people, is more delightful than wine. Pleasing is the fragrance of your perfumes, your name, your character, your reputation, your integrity. That's what she was talking about. Your name is like perfume poured out. No wonder the maidens love you. Everybody can see that you know how to love people. And so that becomes our theme for this entire series, that God's way is better. Amen. Would you turn to your neighbor on either side? You can choose and just tell them, God's way is better. And I think we're going to see that in every week. His way is better than the world's way. And I know what I'm about to say, for a lot of folks in the room, if you're not in a relationship right now, this may be a sensitive topic. It may be challenging for you. But I'm personally convinced that the modern dating scene gets it all wrong. I really am. And you can call me old and outdated if you want to, but I happen to believe that God knows more about relationships than the Kardashians. I'm just convinced of it, okay? Yeah, and if you're not in a dating relationship, I know it can be painful to hear this. It's summertime, and summer seem to be wedding season. I was in one last week here, and I'm sure there's others coming up, probably you've experienced this. If you're single, you've got maybe an aunt or somebody in your family that they'll come around during a wedding and say, "You're next, you're next," and they don't realize, they don't mean anything by it, but they don't realize how hurtful that can be if you're not in a relationship and you'd like to be in one, But I do have a solution for you. I suggested in the first service, and they liked it, and that is the next time there's a death in your family and everybody gets together for the funeral, go up to that aunt and say, "You're next, you're next," No, don't do that. Don't do that. All right. Please don't do that. All right. But what I will tell you can work, and the reason that I say God's way is better than the world's way is a principle that I first heard in sports. I think it applies in so many areas of our life, and that is, you may have had a coach that told you this, you play like you practice. Did you ever hear that expression? You play like you practice. In other words, if you just goof off during practice, you don't really apply yourself, then you get into the game when it really counts. And unfortunately, you can't just turn it on then. You play in the game like you practiced, okay? And so we see that in school, if you'll just buckle down and really work at, apply yourself to your classes, man, you'll reap the benefits of that. If you play like you practice, you'll reap the benefits of that the rest of your life. On a new job, if you work hard, if you apply yourself, even when the boss is not looking, you really put yourself into it, you play like you practice, you'll reap benefits and rewards from that throughout your career. But then all of a sudden we come to relationships and we throw that advice out the door. When in reality, in modern dating relationships, we are practicing for failure. Because, it usually works like this. Boy meets girl. Boy likes girl, so he invites her out to eat. And the girl orders a very expensive item on the menu. And he panics, not sure he's got enough money to cover the bill, But they get through that, and then eventually they start kissing. And then they lay down together. And then maybe the girl suggests, "Why don't you just stay over tonight?" And he says, "Yeah, I'd like that. I think that's a good idea." And before you know it, they're playing house. And that's how they go for a while until boy meets another girl. And he ends that relationship and starts the whole process all over. Rinse and repeat, just all over again. And then maybe many times, I've talked to some people that it's like, "Pastor, it was like relationship after relationship after relationship." Just, And then boy meets special girl. She's the one. And they get married and think it's going to be love forever. In a few years, they're in divorce court because they played like they practiced. All of their other relationships were moving towards a breakup and a failure and starting all over with somebody else. And so in marriage, that's how they practice, that's how they play. Is this making sense? Yeah, that's exactly how the world situation is. And so I want to help you today. We're going to be talking about a season for everything. And I base that from, it's the only verse at least that I know of right now, it's the only verse that we're going to use in the entire series that's not found in the Song of Solomon. But it was written by Solomon, so I don't feel too bad about it. He wrote Ecclesiastes as well. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1. It's a familiar verse you've probably heard before, where Solomon says, "For everything there is a season, a time for every activity under heaven." The issue is that we need to understand is that not all activities were intended to fit into every season. Okay? And you are to make decisions. I am to make decisions as I govern my life, not based on my emotions or my feelings, but I base my decisions on what season I'm in. Okay? So let's start. We left off last week at chapter 2 and verse 7, so let's start at chapter 2, verse 8 now. The woman is doing the speaking. If you remember last week, that's sometimes the issue, and I'm going to try and always let you know who's talking because it obviously helps us to understand it. And the woman is quite excited. As I read this, I think she's grinning from ear to ear. I think she's excited. And she said, "Listen, my lover, look." And I think she's talking to her mom. I think her mom's in the background. She said, "Mama, isn't he fine? Look, here he comes, leaping across the mountains, bounding over the hills. My lover is like a gazelle or a young stag. Look, there he stands behind our wall, gazing through the windows, peering through the lattice." Now that sounds creepy to us. He was not a peeping Tom. He was playing peekaboo. And she liked it. You know, guys, if I could help you with a little bit of advice, you'll do some things that, on Monday that your wife thinks is cute. And on Tuesday, you'll say the same thing, and she'll think you're a pervert. And there is no rational, logical reason for the difference. It's one of those mysteries about women that has never been figured out in the history of the world, okay? So one day it'll be a peeping Tom, and the next day it's a peekaboo, and it's cute, it's fun, But she liked it. And then verse 10 says, "My lover spoke and said to me," and now right in the middle of the verse, the man starts speaking, "Arise, my darling, my beautiful one, and come with me to P.F. Chang's." He's inviting her on a date. And that is the beginning, I think, of the first season that I want to talk about. And I'm calling it, for the sake of your notes, and so we got some alliteration going, I'm calling it the season of perfection. That's what you think it is. It's really the season of infatuation. You might even want to put infatuation in your blank, because I think every relationship probably goes through this season, okay? In fact, I would tell you, you can experience this on a new job. Some of you have. I've had some of you tell me, "Oh, Pastor, I started a new job this week and I love it. Everybody is so nice." Yeah. Let me talk to you in about 6 months. How many have ever been infatuated with a new job and it wore off? Yeah, okay. You can experience that with a church. I always get just a little bit nervous when somebody visits for the very first time at CLC and tells me after the service in the lobby, "This is my church. How can I join? I want to be a member of this church." And you've only been here one time? I don't think you can figure out in one visit whether or not we're the church for you. I think that's infatuation. But it happens in relationships, certainly, just like that. And so, for the benefit of those of you who may be in that season right now, and by the way, you don't have to be 21 to be infatuated. I've seen some 50-year-olds that were still infatuated, or I shouldn't say still, but got infatuated in a new relationship. Okay, so for those of you who think you have found your perfect pookie poo, let me give you 3 things that you need to limit, okay? And for the sake of remembrance, all 3 of them will start with the letter T. The first limitation, I would say, if you think you have found the perfect companion, you need to limit your time with them. Because here's the deal. When you're infatuated with that person, when you see him bounding through the mountains and leaping over the hills, you're going to want to spend every possible moment together with that person. Do not quit your job in order to spend more time with that individual. If you think the person next to you is prone to do that, why don't you reinforce? Look at them and say, "Do not quit your job." Okay. Here's one that I bet everybody here has seen. Do not abandon your friends in order to spend more time with that person that you just met. Okay? That's not smart. In fact, here's maybe an even better way to say it for those of you who may be in the season of infatuation. I would say limit your time alone with that person. The enemy wants nothing better, and the season of infatuation is probably his favorite time to tempt you and pull you into sin. I'm telling you, get to know that person in groups with other people. Okay? I know that dates me, I know. But I think it's a good idea for you to double date or triple date or go out with somebody with, you got 4 or 5 couples together to go see a movie or go to a restaurant or whatever. Because if you stop and think about it, there's nothing you can't do with that individual in a group except, well, I guess one thing that you couldn't do with them in a group that you could do if you were alone. Okay? And it's not the right season for that activity. Okay, so get to know them with a group of people. There will be time for that activity in another season, but it's not for right now. So limit your time. Secondly, limit your talk. Let me explain what I mean by that. When you're in a season of infatuation, don't say things to that person that your relationship can't handle. You've known them for 2 days and you're saying, ooh, you're the one, baby, you're the one. You don't know that she's the one yet. Come on. Don't say things that the relationship can't handle. Don't start planning marriage after about 3 dates. Okay? That's too much too soon. Okay? Don't go out with them a few times and come back and say, baby, I love you. You don't know if you love her or not quite yet. Instead, what you're doing when you say things like that, you're putting pressure on a relationship that does not have a strong enough foundation to sustain that type of pressure. In fact, here's my real concern. I've got a father's heart, okay? My real concern is, don't you break someone's heart by saying stuff that is beyond the level of your intimacy. Don't break that girl's heart. Don't break that guy's heart by saying stuff that you haven't had the time to develop yet. And when I say intimacy, I'm not talking about sex. Intimacy is simply transparency. It's knowing this individual. I know it's corny, but someone said it and it still works. Into me see. So intimacy is where you open up. It's where you let the walls down. It's where you start sharing with them who you are. You open up your heart. You open up, you share your dreams. You share your fears. You do all of that. And you can't do that overnight. It takes time to become intimate, to really see someone. And so limit the things that you're saying to them during that season. Does that make sense? Yes. And then thirdly, you knew this one was coming, limit your touch. Because she'll be looking good, guys, and there's something in you that wants to. But keep in mind, this is not the right season. There's nothing wrong with those feelings. I've had some strange requests from guys over the years, pray that God would take away my sex drive and stuff like that. No. He created you with that. And there's nothing wrong with the feelings, but it's not the right season. Okay? And what I've observed through the years, what I've learned is that the moment you start rubbing and stroking and honking and patting and pulling and caressing, the moment you start all of that, all of a sudden your lustful emotions take over and the relationship goes somewhere that God did not intend or design for it to go quite yet. Does that make sense? You're not going to hear that in the world, but God's way is better. Okay, so let's move on to the next verse and the next season. Verse 11, the woman is speaking, and she said, see, the winter is past. Now, if anybody can understand winter, it's people live in Chicagoland, okay? And so, have you noticed, surely you have, that living in Chicago, that during the winter season, you spend more time inside than you do outside. In fact, some of us kind of go crazy when summer finally gets here. We want to be outdoors all the time because we were cooped up all winter long, okay? But that's an analogy for us in this particular instance, that she says we're coming out of a season where we stayed inside ourselves. We worked on ourselves, maybe. We prepared ourselves. But the rains are over and gone. Verse 12, she said, flowers appear on the earth. The season of singing has come. The cooing of doves is heard in our land. So we've come out of the winter season and now it's springtime. That's what she's saying. We got flowers growing. We got birds cooing. You know, it's a new day. And if you live in Chicago, you like it when spring finally gets here. Even if it only lasts for a week or two like it did this year, okay? You're excited about spring. And then the man speaks up. Verse 14, he said, "My dove in the clefts of the rock, in the hiding places on the mountainside, show me your face. Let me hear your voice, for your voice is sweet and your face is lovely." He's talking about we need to spend some time together getting to know each other now. I need to talk to you. I need to hear your voice, you know. Need to look you eye to eye, see you face to face. That's where we're going to learn our values. That's where we're going to learn about each other. And so that leads us to the second season. After the season of infatuation comes the season of preparation. Everybody say preparation. Now, this is in direct contrast to what I hear from people in the world. I've heard this as far back as when I was dating. I've heard well-meaning people who don't know God's Word say, "Hey, there's a lot of fish in the sea. Take your time. Play the field. Enjoy yourself." You ever heard that advice? Anybody? I hope you haven't given that kind of advice, because that's not the season that we're in the season of preparation. It's not a time just for us to play the field. And I know I didn't have this in my notes, wasn't planning to say it, but just as I prayed and looked at this again, just last night and this morning, I realized, you know, I'm going to be talking to some people who wish you were in the spring season. You relationally, I'm talking. You wish that you already had that perfect someone in your life. But I need to tell some of you that God may have you in winter. Okay? Because winter is that season where He's actually preparing you for your springtime. And I'm not sure what all that looks like with every one of you, but I would just put it like this. Don't neglect the work that God is going to do in you during your winter. For some of you, as much as you'd like to be in a relationship, honestly, what God is doing in this winter season is healing you from some of the hurts of the past. Some of you, maybe you had a marriage that went horribly wrong. Maybe you suffered abuse. Maybe someone betrayed you. Maybe you were hurt very deeply, and you are just now starting to learn how to forgive and be able to trust again. You're just now starting to experience a real healing in your soul. And you're getting to the place where you could think that, well, maybe not all men are awful, or maybe not all women are terrible. You know, you're just now getting to where you could start trusting again. You're in winter, and God is preparing you for the next season of your life. So don't resent the season that you're in. Okay? It may be, spiritually speaking, that your roots, your spiritual roots, need to grow deeper before you can be strong enough to sustain the weight of a relationship. Some of you, it might be some real simple stuff. You know, you may need to learn how to make your car payment every month. You know, I don't think you're ready for a marriage season until you know how to do that. You know, you may need to learn how to show up on time for work every day. You know, that's a good thing to know before you get a wife or a husband, for that matter. You may need to learn to change your underwear every 3 days, whether you feel like it or not. You know, just both services, my wife is just cringing that I would say something like that from the pulpit, and I forgot to ask her. All right, where was it? You're in winter. Winter's not a bad thing. In fact, you know, you can't have spring without a winter. Okay? And so embrace the season that you're in. And if you're not yet married, there will be a season of preparation for you. And here's what needs to happen during that season of preparation, during that winter time that's getting us ready for spring. First of all, you need to become the right person. You're really not looking for somebody. And I know that's how we treat it sometimes. You know, we're on a quest to find our mate, to find our soul mate. I don't think you need a soul mate. I think you need to work on yourself to become the right person. grow yourself. Take some classes, develop some interest, become an interesting person. Hello? If you'll work on growing and developing yourself, in fact, I'll put it to you like this: if you become the right person will come looking for you. Okay? So that's part of your preparation. And the second thing, I'm going to try my best not to get off on a tangent here, because I can wax eloquent on this one. But you need to walk in love. During the season of don't wait till you're married to find this out, but during the season of preparation, you need to walk in love. I don't know where we ever got the phrase that we would say, well, I fell in love. Love is not a ditch. It's not something that you stumble and fall into. All right? But the Bible does say that we walk in love. Love is not an emotion. In fact, that's the danger of falling in love, because as a pastor, I've had a whole bunch of people over the years in my office saying, well, Pastor, I fell out of love. I don't love him anymore. I don't love her anymore. Well, if you fell into it, you can fall out of it. But if you learn to walk in love, you don't ever fall out of that. All right? And one of the best ways, I'm helping somebody today, one of the best ways that you can walk in love is to serve. I'm talking to every man in the room, because we don't tend to get it as well as the ladies do. My observation is that it seems to be more natural for a woman to serve than it is for a guy. Maybe we're trained to be independent. I don't know. I don't want to waste time going there. Don't want to get you all upset about what I just said, okay? But I do know that if you will learn to serve, you've got a leg up on the rest of the world when it comes to walking in love. Yeah. I was the baby of my family, and my mom babied me, okay? I didn't have to do anything around the house. I'm not saying that braggadociously. I'm just reporting facts. I never learned to cook. I never learned to clean. I never learned I didn't learn to do anything. I mean, I just got out of bed in the morning and it was all done for me, In fact, I didn't even make the bed. Didn't know anything about that. My mom spoiled me awful. And then I married Chris, and she was such a loving individual that she did all that stuff for me too. And for the first, I don't know, we haven't talked about it, probably the first 25 years or more of our marriage. Longer? Is that what you said? She said longer. Okay. 30? 35? 35 years, she said. First 35 years of marriage, I never lifted a finger around the house. Didn't think I was supposed to, I'm the man of God. I don't have to do that. And about 10 or 12 years ago, I found out that I could fold the laundry. In fact, I've got an advanced degree now. I can load it into the laundry and start the washing machine. And I know how to empty the dishwasher. I even know how to put the knives down instead of facing up, for all of y'all that haven't figured that out yet. Okay? I've learned how to do those things. And honestly, learning to serve, to take some of the load off of her, and to demonstrate to her that I care enough about her that I'm going to do this without her asking me to. That's some of walking in love, folks. And you can learn it. In fact, you know what? This is a free commercial right now. Our growth track at CLC. If you have not been through growth track, I don't know any better way to say it than you don't know what you're missing. You need to go to growth track. It's going on right now, so you can't get up and leave the service. It's happening right. Happens at 10 o'clock on the first 4 Sundays of every month. Today, the people in growth track are learning about their spiritual gifts, how God has wired them, and it'll help them in so many areas of life. But week 4, July 22nd, I believe that'll be week 4 of Growth Track, is when people choose the ministry in which they want to serve. And I want to tell you, if you want to have a loving relationship with your spouse, if you're not married right now and you say, I need to learn how to walk in love, I need to learn how to serve, I can't think of a better way to get started than to start serving in church. You know, go to that Step 4 class and pick out some ministry that you think you'd like to serve in. Because here's the thing, it's easy. Anybody can selfishly come and sit in church on Sunday morning and worship with the music and listen to the message and go right back home and not do anything to contribute to what's going on with that ministry. But when you learn to serve, when you start working in a ministry, serving in a ministry, all of a sudden your love relationship with that church takes on a whole nother level. And you learn to walk in love by serving. And if you're not married right now and you don't have anybody in your life that you can serve, start serving in church. And you'll already be a step ahead then when God brings Mr. Right or Miss Wonderful to you. Boy, I didn't know I was going to say that today, but it was worth it. It was good. Let's move on. I got one more season. We're going to read verse 15. And the man is speaking now, and he said, "Catch for us the foxes, the little foxes that ruin the vineyards." Now, the first service was a little bit slow about this, but do you remember last week we talked about every time you see the word vineyards in Song of Solomon, it's representing something else. You remember that? What does a vineyard represent in Song of Solomon? Our body. That's right. She said in the first chapter, she said, "I'm dark because my brothers wouldn't let me stay inside. They made me work out in the fields in the sun." And she said, "I couldn't take care of my own vineyard, couldn't take care of my own body, my own skin, because I was busy working in the vineyards." Okay, so that's that same symbol now. He said, "Catch for us the foxes, the little foxes that ruin the vineyards, that ruin our body or ruin the purity of our body. Our vineyards that are in bloom." And so the third season, the final one that we're talking about today, is the season of purity. After the season of infatuation and the season of preparation, it's a season of purity. In fact, it's not even after, it's the season of purity until our wedding, all right? And even though, this is what I was struck by as I studied this, even though their relationship has gotten quite serious now. I mean, we're just a few verses away from their wedding day. It's going to be in chapter 3. But even though the relationship is serious between them, it's still a season of sexual purity. And what I especially, I'm serious, when I was reading this, what jumped off the page at me is that it wasn't the woman who said we've got to keep ourselves pure. It was the guy. And so I interpret from that, and I'm going to preach this, all of the men in the house today. I'm going to tell you, if you're not yet married, it's your responsibility to make sure that you don't go beyond the boundaries that you need sexually. All right. So the question is, if the foxes are the one that spoil the vines, what did the fox say? I mean, what did the fox do? Okay? And literally, if you study this out for yourself, you'll find it. The foxes would come and eat the blossoms off the vines before it was time. Before there was any fruit on the vine, they would eat the blossoms. You say, well, what's the big deal about that? Well, the big deal about that is if they ate the blossoms, there's not going to be any grapes. The blossoms appear first, and then the grapes come. And so he said the foxes would come and eat the blossoms off the vineyard prematurely, before it was the time for fruit. And that, as a result, would ruin everything. And by the way, that means exactly what you think it means. Engaging prematurely in something that God designed to be wonderful and fruitful for us. Okay? So my question that I'm going to close with today is, how do we catch the foxes? He said, we need somebody to catch the foxes. So how do we catch the foxes? And I want to give you 3 ways to do that. The first one is, you need to put parameters around your passion. I said it a moment ago, but it's so true. There's nothing wrong with your feelings. There's nothing wrong with the fact that you have passion, that you have sexual desires, okay? But the Bible compares our sexual desires to a fire. Did you know that? You didn't know that? The Bible said it's better to marry than to burn with lust, okay? And so we were on vacation just a few weeks ago and in the Smokies, and we could see the results of some forest fire. Actually, we saw the results of some kids playing with matches, high school age kids, that destroyed hundreds of thousands of acres. And the devastation there was absolutely awful. But fire can be a good thing if it's contained. I like a fire in the fireplace in wintertime. You know? In fact, I like a fire in a fire pit even in the summertime. With 4th of July this past week, we were in Detroit with our grandkids and we roasted marshmallows and had s'mores on 4th of July. And it was fun. The kids loved it. But that fire was contained. When you let that fire get out of its boundaries, when it goes beyond where it's supposed to be, it can be devastating. And that's exactly what I'm suggesting to you here. You need to put parameters around your passion, not because it's wrong for you to have feelings, but because you don't want it to destroy something that God intended to be very precious. And the best way I know how for you to do that is to use your family as a safeguard. Okay? And you say, Pastor, I wouldn't get any help out of my family. Well, if you can't get that kind of help out of your family, how about your church family? How about somebody right here at CLC that you know and love, and especially somebody that loves you? I'm suggesting to you strongly that somebody needs to know what you're doing. Our problem so many times is that we live our lives especially this part of our life, we live it in isolation. Yeah. And when we get in trouble, we got nobody to call. You know, when you're in the back seat of the car together, it's too late to figure out how far you're going to go. Does that make sense? I mean, you need some safeguard. You need some protection that you've thought about ahead of time. But then in addition to that, you need somebody that knows what you're doing. You need somebody that knows what's on your phone, what you've been looking at, what you've downloaded. Amen. When Pastor Ben Stewart was our executive pastor, some of you already know this about him, but one of the things he mentioned to us one day and just blew me away, he said, when I go home at the end of the day, when I walk into the house, the first thing I do is pull out my cell phone and hand it to my wife, Neely. Because he wanted her to be able to know every conversation he had had that day. He wanted her to be able to know any text that he had sent or received that day. He wanted her to know what he was doing when nobody knew. Okay? Amen. And I'm sure by that time, I don't know that she needed to look at anything anyway, but they had that kind of open relationship. And you know why that's so important? Because every person in this room, and I've looked, I'm not excluding anybody. Every person in this room, including the guy talking to you right now, all of us are just one step away from stupid. And if there's anything that I've observed in my 45, 46 years of ministry, maybe going on 50, in all of my years of ministry, if there's any one thing that I've seen make people stupid, it's their own sexual desires. It's like I met somebody and oh, she's so fine, and throw away a marriage of 30 years, throw away the children, throw away relationships, make a dumb mistake, and the main reason it happened is because we didn't have anybody in our life that could stop us before we got there and say, "What are you thinking?" Amen. Use your family as a safeguard. And finally, I don't know if this is a safeguard or if this is just the best advice I can give you, period, but that is, let Jesus make all things new. Do not let the devil condemn you. Don't go out of here today with your head hanging down, feeling like, man, I've blown it in so many different ways. Welcome to the club. Everybody in this room is thinking about ways that they blew it, okay? We've all made mistakes, but remember the ground rules. We're not looking at our past, we're looking forward. This is what it's going to be like from now on. All right? And I don't want you to think, just because I'm warning you about sexual sin, I don't want you to think that sex in itself is a bad thing. Like I said last week, it's not the devil's idea, it was God's idea. And it's good in its place. In fact, she goes on to say the very next verse, she said, my lover is mine and I am his. They knew now that we belong to each other. And she said, he browses among the lilies. There's 10 or 12 things I could say about that, and I'm not going to say any of them for the sake of time, but I just want to tell you, that's in your Bible. Glory be to God. He browses among the lilies. In fact, the next verse says, until the day breaks and the shadows flee. Somebody, you don't have to be a spiritual giant to understand this. When someone says, until the day breaks and the shadows flee, what time of day are we talking about? Morning? Yeah. You know what she was saying? She was saying, I want you all night long. I want you until the morning breaks and the shadows flee. Turn, my lover, and be like a gazelle or like a young stag. I'm hoping Chris will call me her young stag. Or maybe her old stag. Yeah. Where was I? On the rugged hills. That's the Word of God. I didn't sneak that into your Bible before service today. That's the Word of God. All right? Now, for the sake of time, I'm not going to read the first 4 verses of chapter 3. But as best I can understand it, and what the commentaries seem to indicate, is it was a dream. You won't necessarily know that. You just have to hear it and understand it, I guess. She had a dream that she had become separated from her lover, and she's searching for him. And she can't find him. But after this season of preparation that they've experienced, and that dream that brought the reality of what life would be like without him, it seems like she now knows, boy, he is the one. And I say that in part because it's just like a couple of verses later that the wedding begins. 60 groomsmen in their wedding, by the way. It was a big wedding, all right? But I want you to notice, and then I'm going to close with this. Even when you're absolutely sure that this is the one for you, and you've got the ring on your finger, and you've already set a date for the wedding, I want you to know it's still a season of purity. Amen. And you're going to be tempted probably at that point in your relationship more than any other time. I'm sure you've heard that same voice. It's like, we know we love each other. We know we're going to get married. What difference is that piece of paper going to make? Why can't we go ahead and consummate our relationship? But I want you to notice what she said. The very next verse, she said, it's the very same thing that we closed with last week because it's repeated several times. She said, daughters of Jerusalem, I charge you by the gazelles and by the does of the field, do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires. Which, as I told you last week, doesn't mean until you want it. It means until the time is right. And in God's understanding, His commandments are the time is right once we are married. Okay? The exact same words that she said last week. Now more than ever. If you're at that place in your relationship, and we have engaged couples at CLC, so I may be talking to some of them right now. I may be talking to someone online that's engaged. And I want to tell you that now more than ever, is the time for you to choose to wait for sexual fulfillment. And to her friends, she says, don't try to force this. Wait for God to bring the right companion into your life, just like He did for us. All right? That's what I would want for every unmarried adult at CLC. And here's what I'll tell you. I said it last week. If you want what everybody else has, if you want the kind of relationship that maybe 1 out of 3 wind up in divorce court, then just go ahead and do what everybody else does. But I'm convinced that God's way is better. And if you want what few people have, then you're going to have to do what few people do. And that means putting Jesus first. That means you're not seeking a spouse, you're seeking Him, Jesus. We say, I'm looking for my number one. No, your number one is Jesus. Your spouse is number 2. Okay? Didn't His Word say, seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness? And what? All these things will be added to you.